The ice storm hit Creo 7 like a giant angry beast. Wind screamed across the frozen moon's surface, carrying sharp pieces of ice that could cut through metal. In the dark sky above, lightning cracked and thunder rolled between the thick gray clouds. Vextal pressed his scaly green hands against the cold window of his research ship. His yellow eyes watched the storm grow worse by the minute. The ship shook and rattled as strong winds pushed it around like a toy. "This is bad," he whispered to himself. His voice was rough and deep, like rocks grinding together. Very bad. Vextal was a scientist from the Thermic Empire. His people were reptiles who lived on hot planets near bright stars. They had scales instead of skin and blood that needed heat to flow properly. Cold was their greatest enemy. He had come to this frozen moon to study the humans who worked here. The Empire wanted to know if humans were worth conquering. Were they strong? Were they smart? Could they fight back? So far, Vextal thought humans were weak. They were small and soft. They had no scales or claws. They seemed to need machines for everything. The Empire would easily defeat them, but right now, Vextal had bigger problems than studying humans. His ship was dying. Red lights flashed all around him. Alarms beeped and buzzed. The ship's computer spoke in a flat, mechanical voice. "Warning. Engine failure. Warning. Heat system offline. Warning. Crash landing in 60 seconds. Vextal's heart beat fast. Without the heat system, he would freeze to death in minutes. His kind could not survive in cold like this. It was like poison to them. He ran to the emergency supplies and grabbed a heat pack. He broke it open and felt a little bit of warmth spread across his chest. But he knew it would not last long. The ship hit the ground hard. Vextal flew forward and crashed into the wall. Pain shot through his head and shoulder. Sparks flew from broken machines. The lights went out in the darkness. Vextal heard metal bending and breaking. Something heavy fell and blocked the main door. He was trapped. The cold started to creep. And right away. It came through the cracks in the walls like invisible fingers, touching his scales and making them turn pale. His breath came out in white puffs. Vextal tried to stay calm. He was a scientist. He could solve problems. He looked around with his flashlight and found the emergency exit. But when he tried to open it, the door was stuck. Ice had formed around the edges. He pushed harder. The door moved a little but would not open all the way. The gap was too small for him to fit through. The cold was getting worse. Vextal's hands started to shake. His movements became slow and clumsy. This was how his people died in the cold, slowly. As their blood turned thick and their hearts stopped beating, he had maybe 20 minutes before he would fall unconscious. Maybe 30 minutes before he would die. Vextal kept trying to open the door. He hit it with tools. He tried to melt the ice with his heat pack. Nothing worked. Then he heard a loud crack from below. The ship had landed on ice, and now that ice was breaking under the weight, the floor tilted. Vextal slid toward the back of the ship. He grabbed onto a broken chair to stop himself. Outside, he could hear water moving. Another crack. Louder this time. The ship dropped suddenly. Vextal's stomach jumped. Through a small window, he saw black water rushing up toward him. The ice had broken. The ship was sinking into a partially frozen pond. Water started to come in through the cracks. It was so cold that it felt like fire on Vextal's scales. He screamed and tried to climb higher, but there was nowhere to go. The water rose quickly. First his feet, then his legs, then his waist. Each inch of cold water made him weaker. His heart beat slower. His vision became blurry. He was going to die, not in a fight or an accident, but slowly drowning in freezing water on a moon far from home. Meanwhile, 3 kilometers away, Dongwu was finishing a shift at the mining station. He was a human engineer who had worked on Creo 7 for 2 years. The cold did not bother him much. His people had evolved to live in many different places, including cold ones. Dong-Wu was checking the machines when he saw a bright flash in the sky. Then he heard a loud boom that shook the ground. "What was that?" asked his friend Taeho, who was working nearby. "Maybe lightning," Dongwu said. But he did not think it was lightning. The flash had been too bright and too close. He went to the window and looked out at the storm. In the distance, he could see a small fire burning on the ice. It was not natural fire. It was too steady and too bright. Someone crashed, Dongwu said. Dateho came to look. Could be a supply ship, or maybe a research vessel. Dongwu was already putting on his heavy coat. I need to go check. Are you crazy? Teho grabbed his arm. The storm is too dangerous. You could die out there. Someone might be hurt, Dongwu said. They might need help. The rescue teams will handle it. That's their job? Dongwu shook his head. The rescue teams are 40 kilometers away. By the time they get here, anyone in that crash will be dead. He finished putting on his coat and grabbed his emergency pack. Inside were medical supplies, food, water, and heat packs. He also took a rope and some tools. This is stupid, Teho said. You don't even know if anyone is alive. I have to try, Dongwu said. He stepped out into the storm. The wind hit him. Like a wall, ice cut at his face and hands. But he kept walking toward the crash site. Behind him, Teho watched from the window and shook his head. Humans, he muttered, always trying to save everyone. Dongwu did not hear him. He was already fighting his way through the storm, moving toward the fire in the distance. He did not know that an alien scientist was drowning in freezing water, or that his decision to help would change the galaxy forever. He only knew that someone needed help, and he was going to give it. The storm tried to push Dongwu back with every step. Ice hit his face like tiny bullets. The wind screamed in his ears so loud he could barely think. But he kept moving forward. His boots crunched through the snow. Each step was hard work. The storm wanted to knock him down, but Dongwu was stubborn. When he decided to help someone, nothing could stop him. Behind him, the lights from the mining station grew smaller and smaller. Soon they disappeared completely in the white wall of snow and ice. Dongwu was alone in the storm. He followed the glow from the crash site. It was getting brighter as he got closer. The fire was definitely not natural. It came from burning fuel or broken machines. As he walked, Dongwu thought about what he might find. Maybe it was a supply ship bringing food and equipment. Maybe it was researchers studying the ice. Oh, maybe it was something else entirely. The thought of aliens crossed his mind. There had been rumors about strange ships in this part of space, but most people thought they were just stories. Dongwu was not sure what to believe. After 20 minutes of hard walking, he reached the crash site. What he saw made him stop and stare. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was not human-made. The metal was too smooth and too shiny. The shape was wrong, all curves and angles that hurt to look at. Strange symbols covered the sides. Alien, Dongwu whispered. His breath came out in a white cloud. The ship was half sunk in a pond that was usually frozen solid. But the crash had broken the ice. Dark water moved around the ship like a hungry mouth. Dongwu could see that the ship was sinking deeper. In a few minutes, it would be completely underwater. If anyone was inside, they would drown. He moved closer to the edge of the pond. The ice creaked under his feet. He had to be careful not to fall in himself. That was when he heard it. Splash, splash, splash. Something was moving in the water inside the ship. Something was still alive. Dongwu's heart beat faster. He called out, "Hello, can you hear me?" The splashing stopped for a moment. Then it started again, more desperate than before. "I'm here to help," Dongwu shouted over the wind. "Hold on." He moved around the pond, looking for the best place to help. The ship was tilted at a strange angle. Most of it was underwater, but part of the back was still above the surface. Dongwu could see a small window in that part. And in the window he saw something that made his blood freeze, a face. But not a human face. It was green and covered in scales. The eyes were yellow and large. The mouth was full of sharp teeth. When it saw Dongwu, it pressed against the window and made sounds that might have been words. Dongwu had never seen an alien before. For a moment, he was scared. This creature looked dangerous. It looked like it could kill him easily, but then he saw something else in those yellow eyes. Fear, pain, Desperation. The alien was drowning. It was going to die if Dongwu did not help. Inside the ship, Vextol could not believe what he was seeing. A human face looked back at him through the window. The creature had pink skin and small eyes. It looked weak and soft, but it was here. In the middle of a deadly storm, this human had come to the crash site. Vextol's body was shutting down from the cold. The water was up to his chest now. His arms and legs felt like heavy stones. He could barely move. He pressed his hand against the window and looked into the human's eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice was too weak. The human would not understand his language anyway. The human outside pointed at him and then pointed up. It was trying to tell him something. Then the human disappeared from the window. Vextol felt panic rise in his chest. Was the human leaving? Was it abandoning him to die? But then he heard new sounds from above. The human was on top of the ship, doing something. Tools clinked and scraped against metal. Vextol did not understand what the human was doing. But he felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would not die alone in this freezing water. On top of the ship, Dongwu worked as fast as he could. The metal was slippery and covered in ice. His hands were getting numb from the cold, but he ignored the pain. He found what he was looking for, an emergency hatch. All spaceships had them. This alien ship was different, but the basic idea was the same. The hatch was locked, but Dongwu had tools. He used a metal bar to break the lock. It took several hard hits, but finally the hatch opened. Warm air rushed out, along with the smell of strange chemicals. Dongwu could hear the splashing more clearly now. The alien was directly below him. "Hey," he called down. "I'm going to get you out." He shone his flashlight into the ship. The alien was floating in the water, barely keeping its head above the surface. Its movements were weak and slow. Dongwu could see that it was dying. Aliens or not, no living thing should suffer like this. He took the rope from his pack and tied one end to a strong part of the ship. Then he lowered the other end down to the alien. "Grab the rope," he shouted. The alien looked up at him with those strange yellow eyes. It reached for the rope with shaking hands, but its fingers could not grip properly. Dongwu realized the alien was too weak to hold on. He would have to go down and get it himself. The water below was black and freezing. If Dongwu fell in, he might die too. But he could not leave the alien to drown. "Hold on," he said, though he knew the alien could not understand him. "I'm coming down." Dongwu tied the rope around his waist and started to lower himself into the alien ship. The water was so cold it made him gasp, but he kept going. The alien watched him come down. In its fading consciousness, Vextol could not believe what he was seeing. This human was risking its own life to save him. A complete stranger, an alien enemy. It made no sense. Humans were supposed to be selfish and weak. They were supposed to care only about themselves, but here was proof that everything Vextol believed was wrong. As Dongwu reached the water level, he stretched out his hand toward the drowning alien. "Come on," he said gently. "Let me help you." And for the first time in his life, Vextol reached out and trusted a human. The freezing water hit Dongwu like 1,000 needles. His whole body screamed from the cold. But he did not let go of the rope. He had to save the alien. Vextol was barely floating now. His yellow eyes were half closed. His breathing was shallow and weak. The cold water had stolen almost all his strength. "Stay with me," Dongwu said, even though he knew the alien could not understand him. "Don't give up." He reached out and grabbed Vextol's arm. The alien's skin was cold and rough like sandpaper, but Dongwu held on tight. Vextol felt the human's warm hand on his arm. It was the first warmth he had felt since the crash. Something deep inside him wanted to fight, to survive. Dongwu tried to pull Vextol toward the rope, but the alien was heavy and weak. Every time Dongwu pulled, Vextol's body just floated back down. "Come on," Dongwu said through gritted teeth. "Work with me here." He wrapped his arm around Vextol's chest and started to swim toward the hatch opening above. But the water was rising fast. The ship was sinking deeper into the pond. Dongwu looked up. The opening was getting smaller as water filled the ship. Soon it would be completely underwater. "We need to move now," he said. He grabbed the rope with one hand and held Vextal with the other. Then he started to climb. It was the hardest thing Dongwu had ever done. The rope was slippery with ice. His hands were so cold he could barely feel them, and Vextal was dead weight in his arms, but Dongwu did not give up. He climbed one hand at a time. His muscles burned with effort. His lungs gasped for air. Below them, the water rose higher and higher. Vextal drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he was aware of the human's arms around him. Sometimes he felt them moving upward. But mostly he just felt cold and tired. In his fading mind, he wondered why the human was doing this. Humans were supposed to be selfish. They were supposed to care only about their own kind, but this human was risking everything to save him. An alien, an enemy. Dongwu's hand reached the edge of the hatch. He grabbed it and pulled himself and Vextal up onto the ship's outer hull. They were out of the water. But they were not safe yet. The ship was still sinking, and the storm was getting worse. Dongwu looked at Vextal. The alien was unconscious. Now his breathing was very weak. His scales had turned from green to pale gray. "He's dying," Dongwu said to himself. He had to get Vextal to warm, dry shelter. But the mining station was too far away. Vextal would die before they could get there. Dongwu looked around. The storm made it hard to see anything, but then he remembered something. There was an emergency shelter about half a kilometer away. It was just a small building with basic supplies. But it would have to do. He picked up Vextal and put him over his shoulder. The alien was heavier than he looked. Dongwu's legs shook under the weight, but he started walking anyway. The journey to the shelter was like walking through hell. The wind tried to knock them down. The ice cut at their faces. Dongwu's feet slipped on the frozen ground. Several times he fell. Each time he made sure Vextal did not hit the ground too hard. Then he got up and kept walking. His back ached from carrying the alien. His lungs burned from breathing the cold air. But he did not stop. "Stay alive," he whispered to Vextal. "Just stay alive." After what felt like hours, Dongwu saw the shelter. It was just a small metal building, but it looked like paradise to him. He kicked open the door and stumbled inside. The shelter was cold, but it was dry and protected from the wind. Dongwu put Vextal down on the floor. The alien was still breathing, but barely. His skin was ice cold to the touch. "Hypothermia," Dongwu said. He had seen it before in humans who stayed out in the cold too long. He had to warm Vextal up, but he had to be careful. Warming someone too fast could kill them. Dongwu opened his emergency pack. He had heat packs, thermal blankets, and other supplies. He also had a small heater that ran on batteries. First, he turned on the heater. Then he wrapped Vextal in the thermal blankets. The alien looked small and fragile under the silver material. Next, Dongwu activated the heat packs. He placed them carefully around Vextal's body, on his chest, under his arms, and near his neck, but it was not enough. Vextal's body temperature was still dropping. Dongwu made a decision that could have seemed crazy to anyone watching. He took off his own coat and shirt. Then he lay down next to Vextal under the blankets. "Body heat," he said to himself. "It's the fastest way to warm someone up." He put his arm around the alien and held him close. Vextal's skin was so cold it hurt to touch. But slowly, very slowly, Dongwu's body heat began to warm him. For the next hour, Dongwu stayed there. He shared his warmth with an alien he had never met before. He did not know Vextal's name or where he came from. He did not know if Vextal was good or evil. All he knew was that another living being was dying, and he could not let that happen. Gradually, Vextal's breathing became stronger. His skin started to change from gray back to green. His body began to feel warmer. Finally, Vextal's eyes opened. He looked around, confused. He was in a strange place with a strange creature holding him. For a moment, he panicked. But then he remembered. The crash, the freezing water. The human who had saved him. He looked at Dongwu's face. The human was watching him with concern and relief. Are you okay? Dongwu asked softly. Vextal did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. This human was worried about him. This human had risked everything to save his life. Vextal tried to speak, but his voice was too weak. Instead, he did something that surprised both of them. He reached out and touched Dongwu's hand. It was a gesture of gratitude. A gesture of friendship. Dongwu smiled. You're welcome, he said. Neither of them could understand the other's language. But they understood something more important. They understood that kindness did not need words. Outside, the storm still raged. But inside the little shelter, two beings from different worlds had found something precious. They had found trust. Vextal was alive because a human had chosen to save him. And Dongwu had learned that bravery was not about being fearless. It was about doing what was right, even when you were afraid. The rescue was complete. But their story was just beginning. The storm outside began to calm as dawn broke over Creo 7, inside the emergency shelter. Vextal was getting stronger. His green scales had returned to their normal color. His breathing was steady and deep. Dongwu sat nearby, watching the alien carefully. He had stayed awake all night, making sure Vextal was okay. Every hour he checked the alien's pulse and temperature. He gave him water and kept the heater running. When Vextal fully woke up, he was amazed. He was alive. The human had saved him. Vextal looked around the small shelter. It was simple and basic, but it was warm and dry. The human had shared his food, his heat, and his safety with a complete stranger. Thank you, Vextal said in his own language. His voice was rough but grateful. Dongwu did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He smiled and nodded. You're safe now, Dongwu said. He pointed to himself. Dongwu, then he pointed to the alien. Vextal, the alien replied, touching his chest. They spent the morning trying to communicate. Dongwu showed Vextal pictures. On his tablet, Vextal drew symbols in the dirt. Slowly, they began to understand each other. Vextal learned that Dongwu was an engineer. He worked with machines and helped people. Dongwu learned that Vextal was a scientist. He studied other species and planets, but Vextal did not tell Dongwu the whole truth. He did not say that he was here to study humans for conquest. He felt ashamed of his real mission. Around midday, they heard vehicles approaching. Dongwu looked outside and saw 2 trucks from the mining station. Help is here, he told Vextal. Sujin jumped out of the first truck. She was the medical officer at the mining station. She was smart and kind, and she had been worried about Dongwu all night. Are you crazy? She yelled at Dongwu. You could have died out here. But when she saw Vextal, her anger turned to amazement. Is that an alien? Dongwu said. His name is Vextal. He was drowning in his crashed ship. Sujin stared at Vextal. She had never seen an alien before. He was different from humans. But she could see intelligence in his yellow eyes. Is he hurt? She asked. He almost died from the cold. But he's getting better. Sujin opened her medical bag. She was nervous, but she wanted to help. She checked Vextal's breathing and pulse. His body was different from a human's, but she could tell he was recovering. You saved his life, she told Dongwu. He would have died without you. Vextal watched Sujin work. She was gentle and careful. She did not hurt him or treat him like a monster. She treated him like a patient who needed care. This was not what Vextal had expected. In his empire, aliens were treated as enemies or slaves. But these humans were treating him like a friend. Over the next few days, Vextal stayed at the mining station to recover. Sujin took care of his medical needs. Dongwu visited him often, bringing food and trying to talk. Vextal's ship had a translation device that still worked. Once they found it, communication became much easier. Why did you save me? Vextal asked Dongwu one day. Dongwu looked surprised. Because you needed help. That's what people do. But I'm not human, I'm alien, I could be dangerous. You were drowning, Dongwu said simply. I couldn't just let you die. Vextal was quiet for a long time. In his empire, no one would risk their life for a stranger. Especially not for an alien stranger. Tell me about your people, Dongwu said. Vextal hesitated. Then he decided to be honest. My people are called the Thermic Empire. We are strong and powerful. We conquer other planets and take what we want. Dongwu frowned. That doesn't sound very nice. It's how we survive, Vextal said. The strong rule the weak. That's the natural way. Is that why you came here? To conquer us? Vextal looked away. I came to study humans. To see if your species was worth conquering. Dongwu was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, What did you decide? I thought humans were weak, Vextal said. You have no scales or claws. You need machines for everything. You seemed easy to defeat. And now? Vextal looked directly at Dongwu. Now I think my people are wrong. You risked your life to save mine. You shared your food and warmth with me. You treated me with kindness even though I'm your enemy? You're not my enemy, Dongwu said. You're my friend. The word friend hit Vextal like a lightning bolt. In his language there was no word for friend. There were only words for ally, servant, or enemy. What does friend mean? Vextal asked. Dongwu thought for a moment. A friend is someone you care about. Someone you help when they need it. Someone who makes you happy. Even if they're different from you, especially if they're different from you. Friends teach each other new things. Vextal felt something strange in his chest. It was warm and light. Later, he would learn that humans called this feeling happiness. Sujin joined their conversations often. She was curious about Vextal's world and his people. She shared stories about human science and medicine. On my world, we believe that helping others makes us stronger, she told Vextal. When we work together, we can do amazing things. But what if someone can't help you back? Vextal asked. That doesn't matter, Sujin said. We help because it's the right thing to do, not because we expect something in return. Vextal was learning that humans were not weak at all. They were strong in ways his people had never imagined. They were strong in their hearts. After a week, rescue ships arrived from both civilizations. The human ship came to pick up Dongwu and Sujin. The Thermic Empire ship came to pick up Vextal. Vextal stood at the landing pad looking at both ships. He had a choice to make. He could tell his empire the truth about humans, that they were kind and peaceful. Or he could lie and say they were dangerous. If he told the truth, his people might try to conquer humanity anyway. If he lied, he might be able to protect them. Commander Zixamore stepped out of the thermic ship. He was Vextal's boss, a large reptile with black scales and red eyes. Vextal, he said in their harsh language, what have you learned about the humans? Vextal looked at Dongwu and Sujin. They were standing nearby, ready to say goodbye. They had no idea that their lives depended on his next words. The humans are unsuitable for conquest, Vextal said carefully. Why? Zixamore demanded. They are too dangerous. They have powerful weapons and strong defenses. They would fight back hard. The cost would be too high. It was a lie. But it was a lie that would save lives. Zixamore looked disappointed. Are you sure? They look weak to me. Looks can be deceiving, Vextal said. I recommend we avoid this sector completely. Zixamore nodded. Very well. Your report will be filed with the High Command. As the thermic ship prepared to leave, Vextal walked over to Dongwu and Sujin. Thank you, he said in human language. He had been practicing. Will we see you again? Sujin asked. Maybe, Vextal said. I hope so. He gave them a small device. This is a communicator. If you ever need help, use it. Dongwu shook Vextal's hand. Take care of yourself, friend. Friend, Vextal repeated. The word still felt strange and wonderful in his mouth. As the thermic ship flew away, Vextal looked back at the mining station. He had come to Creo 7 to study humans for conquest. Instead, he had learned about friendship, kindness, and courage. He had learned that true strength was not about having claws or scales. It was about having the courage to help others even when it was dangerous. In the months that followed, Vextal became a secret advocate for peace within the Thermic Empire. He used his influence to steer his people away from human space. He also began to secretly communicate with Dongwu and Sujin, sharing information that would help humanity prepare for future contact with alien civilizations. The Empire never knew that their decision to avoid humanity came from a single act of kindness. They never knew that one human's courage to save a drowning alien had changed the course of galactic history. But Vextal knew. And he would spend the rest of his life working to bridge the gap between species. Remembering the day when a human named Dongwu taught him that the strongest weapon in the universe was compassion. In his private moments, Vextal would often think about that frozen pond on Creo 7. He had gone into that water expecting to die alone. But he had been pulled out by a stranger who became a friend. And that made all the difference in the galaxy.